So this next summer is the Olympics in Paris. Now, a question, how many of you like the Olympics and find yourself, you watch quite a few of them? Raise your hands. Okay, great. How many of you could care less? Raise your hands. Yeah, that's about an even distribution. My wife is a huge sports fan. She watches a lot of volleyball, but when the Olympics come on, there have been years where she said, "Oh, do we need to subscribe to some extra channels?" Because she wants to watch it all. And it's on multiple channels. I mean, she'll watch all kinds of interesting things just because it's the Olympics. She's quite the sports fan. Have you noticed the evolution in sport that's taken place over the last probably 50 years? The first real Olympics I remember watching were the 72 Olympics. I was a wrestler in high school, and so I was real interested in watching the Olympics. In Munich, you might remember, that was the one where the Palestinians took the Israeli wrestling team hostage. Remember that whole thing? So I was glued to the TV for all of that because that was what I was interested in, was wrestling. And so that was my first real memory of watching the Olympics. But just looking at the evolution of sport, not just in the Olympics, but in all competitive sports, how the equipment and the stuff they wear has changed, especially in track and swimming. Have you noticed? Man, it's gotten to the point where the difference between a gold and a silver medal can be just 1/100th of a second. And so they're trying to shave off every bit of extra weight, any kind of friction. And so swimmers shave their entire bodies to try to cut down on the drag in the water. And they wear virtually nothing. These track stars wear onesies. And they're super tight, right? To cut down just on the friction of the air on their bodies. Their shoes are so high-tech, 5-ounce shoes. Next time you go to the outlet mall, go to one of the shoe stores and pick up some of the competitive shoes and just feel how light they are. They're like a feather because they want to shave off every tiny little bit of time that they can, because it may be the difference between a gold and a silver medal. So imagine this now. It's this next summer. It's the Paris Games, and it's the 100-meter sprint. And the runners come out, they're all in their onesies, these tiny little shoes that they have on. And they all line up and they get ready. But one of the competitors, he comes to the line, and he looks like he's stepped off of Wall Street. He's wearing a wool Armani suit. He has a white dress shirt on. He's got a tie. He's wearing wingtips and a fedora. He's got an umbrella hooked over his left arm and a briefcase in his right arm. And he walks up to the starting line, but he has a competitor's number pinned to his chest. Can you picture that image? And the field judge comes up to him and says, what are you doing? And he says, I'm running. You can't run like that. The guy says, why not? Is there a rule against me running like this? And the judge thinks, there's no rule. Okay, listen, everybody in the stands knows, is that guy winning? No, he's not going to win. He may be as skilled as the rest of the athletes that are on that line right there. I mean, obviously he would have to be to even be able to qualify to be in the race. But everybody knows he's not going to win. Listen, those that are in the race run to win. And so what they're going to do is they're not going to step to the line dressed in a way that ensures they won't win. The letter to the Hebrews was written to the followers of Jesus, Jewish followers of Jesus, who were being pressed to go back to the Judaism of their past. And so the writer takes pains in the early chapters to show the superiority of Christ and the gospel to Moses and the law. And then he gets to a point in the letter where he reminds his readers of their heroes. After speaking of the superiority of the gospel of Christ, he reminds them, hey, listen, the people that you look back on our history and you say, these were great heroes of the faith. Think about it. Every single one of them faced difficulty. That's why they're heroic. They didn't have an easy life. Their faith was proven by challenge, by obstacles. And then he gives his readers the invitation, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with your heroes. They were pressed, they faced difficulty, and they persevered. You're facing pressure, you can persevere as well. And now he's going to conclude with an exhortation that these readers would step up and line up shoulder to shoulder with their heroes. Look at what he says, verse 1 of chapter 12. Therefore we also, that is along with the heroes that he has listed there in chapter 11. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Now, while the writer of Hebrews is anonymous, I think that we have a hint here that it's the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul loved these images of the Christian life as being an athletic competition. In fact, in writing to the Romans, he says this, in writing to 2 Timothy, his protege, his last letter, he says this, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. It's similar here. The writer is saying, hey, keep the faith, finish the race. And the image that's conveyed by the words here was well known to the people who are reading them, because the Romans had built theaters for athletic competition all over their empire. There was one, a huge one, in Jerusalem. The annual games that were held in these sports arenas drew athletes from all over. The foot race was the premier event, as it is in our modern Olympics. But the stands that are mentioned here are filled with special spectators. It's a mighty multitude of the heroes of the faith. And they aren't just spectators so much as they are examples. The idea is that they've already run their race and they finished. And now they've taken their seat, not so much to watch us run, but to testify that the race can be done. It can be won. They remind us that even the best mess up, stumble, and fall. But as we get back up and we keep moving forward by faith, God forgives and he restores. I mean, guys, think of this. Think of David. Think of David. His example. He proves that failure doesn't disqualify. He slew a giant and then was felled by a bathing beauty. He trusted God to protect him from King Saul, and then he pretended to be insane with a Philistine king. David rode a spiritual seesaw, didn't he? He was up, doing great things of faith, and then he fell to these amazing depths. When David was good, he was very good, and when he was bad, he was awful. Abraham, the father of the faith, he trusted God to lead him to the wild west of Canaan, but he didn't trust him to provide for him once he got there. Remember that little side trip that he took to Egypt during a time of famine? He goes to Egypt and he says that his wife is in fact his sister so that the Egyptians won't kill him. Remember that? Oh, and by the way, do you remember he picked up somebody in Egypt? Someone by the name of Hagar, who proves to be a problem that we're still dealing with today? Think of Isaac and Jacob, Judah, Samson. The list goes on of all of those that rose in faith to great heights, but were far from perfect. They all tripped and stumbled at some point along their course, but God's grace restored them, put them back on the track to cross the finish line and receive the prize. Think about some of the people that we look back on in the Bible as great heroes of the faith. John the Baptist, okay, that guy was an oddball, but he finished. John Mark, he wimped out on his first missionary journey, but he finished. Mary Magdalene began possessed by demons. She finished. The missionary William Carey, he was a dull-witted bore. He finished. He translated the Bible into the languages of India that resulted in millions of people coming to faith in Christ. And I think of Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards, oh my goodness, probably the greatest theologian America has ever produced, preached a message that led to the First Great Awakening. Did you know that he was a pastor? He got fired from his pastorate. But he didn't let that stop him. He continued to believe in God, and God put him back in the ministry. Friends, these all now sit in the stands cheering us on, saying that I'm proof that you can win. They say, listen, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, during the last Olympics, I remember watching some of it with my wife and volleyball. It was a beach volleyball. You know, they got the two competitors on each side. And the camera would show athletes from other events that were in the stands cheering on the American team. And these were athletes that had finished. You know, they've already got their medals. Some of them would wear their medals to the games, and they'd be sitting there and they'd be cheering on the Americans as they'd be playing volleyball. It's kind of the idea here. We look back on all these people and we see, listen, they made it. And they're an example to us. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to trust in Jesus Christ. And know that when you fall and when you stumble, it's not the end, because God's grace is greater. Where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. Just keep looking to Christ. Now, you may be thinking, compared to those greats of the faith, who am I? I'm an also-ran. My name will never be recorded in the history books. You know, when Abraham traveled that dusty road from cosmopolitan to the wild west of Canaan, and he pitched his goat hair tent under that Middle Eastern sky, he never thought that people would be reading about him millennia later, 4,000 years later, and here we are. 4,000 years later, honoring this man because he simply believed in God. Moses, tending his sheep on the backside of the desert, had no idea that millions would honor him as one of history's all-time greatest people. Rahab, Ruth, Boaz, Esther, Deborah, Jeremiah. None of them thought that they would be remembered beyond a couple of generations. But they are remembered. And you know why they're remembered? Listen, because of their faith. Because of their faith, God remembered them. God marked them down. And it made sure that they would be included in the record of His faithfulness to be an encouragement to us. Your faith carves out for you a special place of honor with God. No, our names are not likely to be recorded in the chronicles of history, to be studied by high school students 100 years from now. Our names are probably not going to be there. But let me tell you, your name is recorded in a far more important chronicle. It's the Lamb's Book of Life. And the day is coming when you will, in fact, stand in the glory of heaven, and God will announce you and your new name before all of creation. The writer now tells us how we can be sure to finish. Look at what he says. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. The race that we are in is not a competition with one another. We're not competing against each other. We are competing with the course itself. Our race is a bit like a steeplechase. 7.5 laps, 28 barriers, 7 water traps that the runner has to jump over or run through. The unique challenge of the steeplechase is that they set the obstacles at a place and a way where the runners can't really develop a rhythm. They're calculated to keep breaking your rhythm so that you have to constantly adapt to the course. The barriers are set so that the runners have to pay close attention and run with purpose. You see, they know that the obstacles are part of the race, and so they don't just adjust their stride to jump over them. If you watch the steeplechase, a lot of times they'll jump onto them and then use them to propel themselves even farther on the other side. May I say, isn't that just like the Christian life? We would love a nice smooth track just nice and smooth, no ups, no downs, no barriers, that rubberized surface. Oh man, we would love that. But that's not life, is it? No, life has challenges. It has obstacles. And the idea is that we can either run into them and get entangled in them or fall down because of them, or we can recognize that the obstacles and the challenges are a part of the track to actually propel us further along. Instead of, oh man, here's an obstacle. Look at it like the steeplechaser. Here's an obstacle. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to now adjust my stride. I'm going to hit the top of it, and I'm going to use that perspective, that position now, to actually jump beyond it and make even more ground, even more headway. Let me ask you a question. Is God in charge of your life? Does He know the obstacles that are before you? Could it be that He wants to use them to propel you even further along the way? Are you going to learn patience apart from hardship? Hello? Are you going to learn real love apart from meeting jerks? It's easy to love the lovable. It's hard to love the people that are difficult, isn't it? What kind of love does God want you to have? Easy love or tough love? Seasoned love, tough love. Does he want you to come into heaven as a whiner or a victor? Then you've got to have some things to have victory over, some challenges. Does not our Jesus deserve a bride with some spine, some courage, some toughness? Jesus deserves an eternal companion, his bride, the church, you. He deserves a bride that has proven your faith. And so God will set challenges and obstacles before you like a steeplechase. Don't look at them as, oh no, here's another challenge. Look at them, yes. Because I'm going to learn to be more like Christ because of this challenge and this obstacle. The writer tells us how to make sure that we finish the race. We lay aside every weight. We set aside ensnaring sin, and we keep running. Weights are anything that slow us down in our walk with God. The Olympic athletes are disciplined. There's lots of things they don't engage, they don't get involved in because it would slow them down. Those that run the 100 meters do not have biscuits and gravy every morning for breakfast. They don't. They might like to, but they know that gravy does not taste as good as gold feels. You see, they have a goal. It's a gold medal hanging around their neck. And they know that they could order biscuits and gravy, but they know that if they did, they're never going to feel that gold. And so there's some things that they decide, you know what, that can't be part of my diet. Maybe after I win the medal, I'll have some biscuits and gravy. But till I win, no, that can't be a part of my life. The weights are things that would slow us down in our walk with God, in our pursuit of Christ. And they're anything that would get in the way. Career, possessions, some relationships. You know, these things are morally neutral. It depends on what impact and effect they have on us. It's interesting that in 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Build me up. That phrase, lay aside, is used by the ancient athletes as they would prepare for competition. They would literally lay aside every weight. You probably know this. Ancient athletes competed in the buff. They took off all their clothes and competed naked. The call here is to rid ourselves of anything that would hinder our pursuit of Christ. Is there anything in your life that competes with your affection for Christ? A habit, a hobby, maybe a relationship. Lay it aside. Set it down. Ditch it. While weights slow us down, sin can disqualify us. That word ensnare means to encircle, to hem in. It speaks of control. Please hear me. Satan hates you because you are an image bearer of God. He wants to annihilate you. And the means by which he does that is sin. But Satan knows that if he comes to you and says, here, sin, because it'll destroy you, none of us would give in to that. So what does he do? He packages sin in an appealing package. He makes it look appealing to us, and it comes, hey, listen, it's just a little thing. It's no big deal. You can do this and no one will know. But his goal is to ensnare you, to take control of you. How many people today are addicted to sin, some sin, and when they first began, they thought they could do it and get away with it? Those that are addicted to drugs or alcohol, to pornography, the temptation didn't start there. It started out when they were innocent. The enemy coming, listen, don't worry, you can do this, no one will know. It's the devil's desire to take away your power to choose so that that chooses for you, whatever that thing is. And it sets your pattern and your behavior. That's the idea of entangling sin. Don't let the enemy destroy you by telling you, listen, it's just a small little thing. His goal is to destroy you. Remember that when you're tempted. So ditch the weights, avoid the sin, and then keep running. The Christian life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. What we need is endurance, not speed. Many begin, but not all finish. And friends, remember, we're not competing with each other. We're competing with the course itself. The goal isn't to beat others to the finish line. It's to make it to the finish line. Can I get an amen? Verse 2 is the key to endurance. Look at what he says. Looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus is the prize. Friends, keep your eyes on the prize. Jesus is our trailblazer. He's gone before us, he says. He's blazed the trail for us. You know, Adam was supposed to be our trailblazer, to show us what it meant to be human. He was our original father, but he failed. Jesus did what Adam failed to do. He lived as a human is created to be, with perfect harmony with God. And he ever lives to guide us by his indwelling spirit along this trail that he has blazed for us. We look to and we follow him. And as we do, he will take us through, well, joys and sorrows, ups and downs, in and outs. Our path in the Christian life, it lies through meadows and deserts, mountain peaks and canyons, both sunlit and dark fields. That's the course that has been set for us. Why? Because that course, listen, is shaping us into the men and women that we need to be to enjoy all of the fullness and the glory of heaven. And he's stepped with us every step of the way. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because he is with us. You see, as we walk with Christ on the path that God has ordained, we're made into the people that we were created to be. Now, one of the greatest mile matchups in history took place on August 7th of 1954 in the British Empire Games in Vancouver, Canada. The only two men to have broken a 4-minute mile up to that point were going to compete for the first time. Roger Bannister and John Landy. It was billed as the Miracle Mile. Both of these men were in peak condition. It was the prime of their competitive careers. So the race began, and Landy led by a couple of strides through most of the race, forcing Bannister to have to kind of alter his running strategy just to keep up. And then came one of track history's most famous moments. As they were coming around the final bend into the home stretch, the crowd was just going crazy. So loud were they that Landy, who was in the lead, could not hear Roger Bannister's footfalls, and he didn't know what kind of a lead that he had. And so as he's coming into the final stretch, he looks back over his shoulder to see where Bannister is. Now, anybody here ever run competitive track? Anybody here in high school, did you run track? What happens if you look back over your shoulder? What happens to your stride? It breaks your rhythm. It breaks your stride. And that was enough, just enough, for Roger Bannister to shoot by Landy, and he ended up winning the race by 5 yards. Just because of that one backward glance. My brothers and sisters in Christ, please hear me. With all conviction, I believe we've entered the last stretch of human history. Look at what's happening in our world. Look how the stage has been set. We're in the last stretch. Don't look back. Don't be distracted by the shiny distractions along the side of the track, the noise of this world. Don't keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on Jesus. He's beckoning us with open arms. Run, because time is short. So let's go all out. I feel kind of like a coach this morning. Let's go all out. Because that's what the writer is saying. Are there weights? Are there things that are holding you back? Some affection that's competing with your affection to and devotion to Christ? Is there some sin that's entangling your legs and just keeping you from running?